Alright everyone, welcome back to another video. Last time we left off with part 3, the Industrial Revolution and World Power, 1866 to 1918. This just gives a little bit of a prelude of what we're going to get into, a little bit of America's Industrial Revolution, and then its rise subsequently to a world power. Not the world power, but a world power. Um, yeah, if I can turn the page now. Got to be very careful what I show on this page. We're now on to Reconstruction years, Johnson and Grant. Reconstruction had three meanings. One, of course, was the physical rehabilitation of a war-torn section of the country. Another was the restoration of the seceding states to their full place in the Union. But the third, the most difficult and significant, was the adjustment of racial relations between the white Southerners and their former slaves. President Andrew Johnson put little emphasis on the last. He was a Unionist, but also a Southerner, and he thought that once slaves were emancipated, they could be safely left to the individual states. Um, yeah, they could be left to the individual states, and I lost my spot. Yeah. Radical Republicans feared that this would mean the establishment of a kind of general serfdom and second-class citizenship for the former slaves. They established a Freedmen's Bureau to handle racial issues and insisted on equal suffrage. One reason why this was politically important was that the electoral vote of the South would be increased, since slaves counted for only 3/5 as much as freedmen's in appropriation meant. Jeez, oh my. Um, and there were no slaves. The radical Republicans also tried to curb Johnson's power with the Tenure of Office Act. Oh boy. Yeah, let's try again. By which the consent of the Senate was required for removals from, as well as appointed to, federal office. When Johnson violated this law by removing Edwin Stanton from the War Department, the House Republicans impeached him, and the Senate acted as a court to try the case. A two-thirds verdict is required in such cases. The Democrats voted solidly for Johnson, and they were joined by 7 Republicans who, though they did not like Johnson, thought that the Tenure of Office Act was unwarranted by the Constitution. Since then, no president has been impeached. Grant sided with the Reconstructionist Republicans. He had never hereto taken any interest in politics, but his military prestige enabled him to gain an easy victory over Governor Seymour of New York. The new administration had some successes. It restored financial credit and, with the able Secretary of State Hamilton Fish, arbitrated outstanding claims against Great Britain. But Grant's political inexperience was evident in many of his appointments. Personally honest, he was too loyal to unworthy friends. Grant was discovered in postal and Indian reservation contracts. Oh boy. Yeah. And in the licensing of distilleries. A liberal Republican reform movement sought an alternative to Grant in 1872. Unfortunately, they chose as their candidate Horace Greeley, an editor of Genius, but erratic and unstable. As one historian put it, the man of no ideas was running against the man with too many. Grant was easily victorious. The executive branch was not alone in being tainted. Many congressmen had accepted bribes from railway companies. Local government in the South was wielded by Northerner carpetbaggers, as if all their wealth were held in one carpet bag. In New York City, the Tweed Ring, supported by Tammany Hall, plundered the city of many millions of dollars. Yeah, so they get into quite a lot of important things here, of course. Andrew Johnson and Reconstruction and all that. Andrew Johnson, here's the thing. A lot of people point out Andrew Johnson being a very bad president, and he was. Andrew Johnson really wasn't the best president, and wasn't the best for Reconstruction, at least for what Reconstruction needed. The third thing, you know. And so he got a lot of flack during his time, and obviously much later as well in our time. But Andrew Johnson was given a bad hand. He was never really meant to be president. Abraham Lincoln was supposed to be. But also, um, the government itself worked against him. He couldn't necessarily do what he was supposed to do to some degree because the entire governmental system was against him. Um, the Tenure of Office Act was an absolute sham. It should not have ever been made as a law, and it was unconstitutional. It was found later to be unconstitutional. Um, any president should be able to fire those within office. If they are in his cabinet, he should be able to fire them. If he cannot fire them, he cannot work as effectively as president. Because, for instance, what if, oh, well, actually, in this case, what if you become vice president and you don't necessarily get along with everybody in your cabinet? Well, then that only causes issues, and it could lead to issues for the wider nation. As president, you should be able to fire those people and replace them with people that you more get along with, or at least people that you can work with. And the fact that he was impeached for this is a little ridiculous. Now they do bring up, oh, no presidents have been impeached since. That is untrue now. This book was made before some impeachments were made, but yeah, I mean it's a pretty interesting nonetheless. And Grant as well. Grant was a good person to be president. A good person. He did a lot. He gets rid of the Klan, and I can't say their full name because YouTube will, of course, strike this. But the Klan, he creates the Justice Department to deal with them. They deal with them pretty effectively. They don't really have any power until about Woodrow Wilson. And Grant, pretty good. But one problem Grant really has is who he trusts. Like they said, Grant had a lot of friends, and those friends he should not have trusted. And he realized that later, but by that point it's too late, you know. And nothing you could have done about it. Grant actually flirts with the idea of a third term, but it just isn't politically viable. He doesn't succeed at that. So, um, yeah, but it would have been interesting. He would have been the first president to be a third term. Interesting nonetheless. But now we'll get into the pictures. At the left here is following the war, normal schools were set up in the South for the education of former slaves. Lucy, this lady right here, front center, and Sarah Chase, front left, and that lady there, I believe. I don't know, that lady here, probably. Um, worked for the Freedmen's Bureau and are shown with a group of normal school teachers at or near Norfolk, Virginia in 1865. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of these schools set up, and a lot of things to help these people integrate into society because, I mean, obviously they've been slaves for a long time. They don't necessarily um, fit in as you would probably want them to. So you have to give them a lot of help. They set up schools for them, things like that. Now, during the Reconstruction era, this actually works pretty all right, pretty effectively for a while. But obviously, when Reconstruction gets ended, it doesn't quite work so well anymore. It's very unfortunate. A lot of these people suffer for things that they should not have. But yeah. In the bottom left here is a scene in Richmond, Virginia, after the evacuation of the Confederate troops in the city on the 1st of April, 1865. Yeah, so when they leaves all these freedmen, a bunch of other people just hanging out, you know. They're free now. I mean, the Emancipation Proclamation's already been basically stated, and so, and in all sense of the term, they're free. Probably is a weird feeling for them, you know. Like, I don't know. It would be weird to be them. I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. So this is the picture I have to be very careful with. So, this picture here is a victorious, or a vicious, not victorious, a vicious poster uh, deriding the activities of the Freedmen's Bureau. Yeah, so you can see some of the words there. I'm not going to fully focus on them just in case, but yeah, you can see what they're basically talking about. Like, oh, look at us. We have to build everything. We built everything. And oh, these people, they get to just relax and not do anything. Like, it's clearly wrong, not true, but it's to try to give a very bad image of the Freedmen's Bureau, and it will kind of work. Freedmen's Bureau doesn't really last for ever forever, obviously, and the people that worked very hard on it, you know, their work kind of gets thrown to the dust. A lot of the fears that they had actually come to fruition eventually. And at the bottom here is the Freedmen's Bureau was a national agency created in March 1865 to provide relief and guidance for blacks and other refugees who had concentrated around the army camps and in the southern towns and cities. One of the reasons that they have to step in is because there's going to be a lot of um, racial issues. These people don't just get over it. You know, you can see these people will be very upset by these people, and it really will come to head many a times. So you have to have a group of people that are willing to step in and be like, hey, look, we can all get along, it's all be good. Um, and they managed to do pretty well for a while. Gotta make sure I don't accidentally show that picture. At the left here is a facsimile of a ticket of admission to the impeachment trial of President Andrew Johnson. And yeah, this, like I said, it's a big deal. So they're gonna want to try to show this off. Ooh, you can come see the president be impeached. Ooh, very fancy. Be a weird ticket to get, but yeah. At the bottom here is the managers of the House of Representatives at the impeachment trial of Johnson. Standing left to right are James F. Wilson of Iowa, George S. Boutwell of Massachusetts, and John A. Logan of. Oh, my bad. Uh, no, Boutwell is Massachusetts. Okay, there's John A. Logan of Illinois. Sorry, having to look at the thing is a little difficult here. And then seated, left to right, are Benjamin F. Butler from Massachusetts, Thaddeus Stevens of Pennsylvania, Thomas Williams of Pennsylvania, and then John A. Bingham of Ohio. These are pretty important people. And like very fancy. It's always funny looking back at some of these pictures at the time and seeing some of the mustaches and facial hair. That guy looks like Jim Carrey, does he not? Just saying, he does. Okay, I'm sorry, but he kind of does. But yeah, Thaddeus Stevens, pretty well known. Butler also quite well known. But now we'll get into this picture here. Is below. This is Andrew Johnson, obviously. He doesn't look too happy. Never did. I mean, if I were him, I wouldn't have been very happy. You could say either. At the right here is Thaddeus Stevens and John A. Bingham before the Senate. Giving a little talk there, you could say. And then below here is Ulysses S. Grant. And then at the right is Hamilton Fish, Grant's second Secretary of State. Yeah, Grant, sadly, he will have a very unfortunate passing. Not really that long after he's president. Writes a memoir, which is why we know a lot of stuff about Grant. but he writes it while he's basically suffering from, I believe it's throat cancer, mouth cancer. I don't remember exactly which, but it's something to do with his oral region. And yeah, awful way to go. He's in constant pain from doing anything really. But he writes his memoir, and yeah, very interesting guy. Probably one of the best people we've ever had as president. Um, very. And I really wish Grant would have had a better presidency. Maybe not have some of the people that he did have in his cabinet and stuff like that, because he really could have been an amazing president. But that's gonna do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you have any ways I can improve these videos, leave a comment down below. I always appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.